June 29, 1986. Mexico City's Azteca Stadium. Vinny Torino sat in the officials' booth watching referee Antonio Hernandez receive his final instructions. The envelope containing $200,000 had been delivered that morning. The target was clear: break Maradona's ankle before halftime. 50,000 fans roared as Argentina's golden boy touched the ball. Hernandez signaled the defender. The tackle came hard and dirty. Maradona screamed, clutching his leg. But then something impossible happened. Something that made the Camorra bosses go silent. Something that turned Vinny's blood to ice. Maradona stood up, smiled directly at the official's booth, and scored the most beautiful goal in World Cup history on a shattered ankle. That night changed everything. The mob war that followed, the bodies that dropped, the secret Maradona had been keeping. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The official's booth erupted in chaos. Camorra underboss Salvatore Grimaldi crushed his cigar between yellowed teeth, ash spilling across his expensive suit. "What the fuck just happened?" he snarled into his radio, eyes locked on the Argentine players celebrating below. Vinny's hands trembled as he gripped the binoculars. Through the lenses, he could see Maradona limping toward the tunnel, but there was something in the player's gait, calculated, deliberate, like he was performing. "The ankle's broken," Vinny whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "I saw the x-rays this morning. How is he—" "Shut up, Torino." Grimaldi backhanded him across the mouth, splitting his lip. "You said this was foolproof. You said your referee would handle it clean." Blood trickled down Vinny's chin as he watched replays on the monitor. The tackle had been perfect. Hernandez had positioned the defender exactly as instructed. The impact should have ended Maradona's tournament, maybe his career. Instead, the bastard had turned a career-ending injury into the goal of the century. Grimaldi's radio crackled. "Boss, we've got a problem. Argentine security is asking questions. They want to know why our people were in the medical area this morning." Vinny's stomach dropped. The x-rays. Someone had leaked the pre-match medical reports showing Maradona's existing injury, the hairline fracture they'd paid a fortune to learn about. It was supposed to be their insurance policy, proof that one good tackle would finish him. Now it was evidence of their conspiracy. "Clean it up," Grimaldi ordered. "All of it. The medical staff, the x-rays, anyone who knows about the money." He turned to Vinny, grabbing him by the throat. "Starting with you." But before Grimaldi could tighten his grip, his lieutenant burst through the booth door. "Boss, FIFA officials are coming up. Full investigation team." Grimaldi released Vinny, who collapsed against the window, gasping. Below, Maradona was being carried on a stretcher, but as he passed beneath their booth, he turned his head upward. For one impossible moment, their eyes met through the glass. Maradona winked. The gesture hit Vinny like a physical blow. That wink wasn't pain medication or adrenaline. It was recognition. Knowledge. Maradona knew about the conspiracy, had always known. But how? "Move." Grimaldi shoved past him, already planning their escape route. "This is bigger than we thought." As FIFA investigators flooded the booth, Vinny found himself alone with the monitors, watching the replay again and again. Frame by frame, he began to see what he'd missed in the moment. The way Maradona had positioned his body before the tackle, protecting his good ankle while exposing the already damaged one. The calculated fall that absorbed most of the impact. The performance of pain that lasted exactly long enough for the defender to believe he'd succeeded. It wasn't just genius. It was orchestrated. Vinny's blood went cold as the pieces clicked together. The mysterious tip about Maradona's injury. The surprisingly easy access to Argentina's medical files. The referee who'd been more than willing to take their money. It had all been too clean, too simple. They hadn't bought Hernandez. Someone else had first. The booth door slammed shut behind him, and Vinny realized he was alone. Through the window, he could see Grimaldi's men being questioned by FIFA security, their carefully laid plans unraveling in real time. The Camorra's reputation was built on fear and precision. Tonight, they'd been made to look like amateurs on the world's biggest stage, by a 25-year-old football player who should have been screaming in an emergency room. Vinny grabbed the encrypted radio, switching to the emergency frequency. "This is Torino. We have a code red. Repeat, code red." Static answered him. Then a voice he'd never heard before, young, female, with a slight Argentine accent. Vincent Torino, born March 15, 1951, in Naples, FIFA referee coordinator since 1982. Father to Sofia Torino, age 12, resident of Via Caracciolo, apartment 4B, his daughter. They knew about Sofia. "Who is this?" Vinny's voice cracked. "Someone who's been waiting 16 years for this conversation. Diego sends his regards." The line went dead. Through the booth window, Vinny watched as Mexican police surrounded Grimaldi's men. In the distance, Argentina's team bus was pulling away from the stadium, carrying their wounded hero toward a destiny that would reshape football history. But Vinny knew the truth now. Maradona hadn't just survived their assassination attempt, he'd turned it into the opening move of his own game. A game that had been 15 years in the planning, with rules only one man understood. As sirens wailed outside and FIFA investigators pounded on the booth door, Vincent Torino realized he wasn't just a conspirator anymore. He was a pawn, and the real match was only just beginning. The phone in his pocket buzzed with a text message. Via Caracciolo. 1 hour. Come alone, or your daughter learns what kind of man her father really is. Outside, 50,000 people were still celebrating the greatest goal they'd ever witnessed, unaware that they'd just watched the first move in the most elaborate revenge plot in sports history. The text message burned in Vinny's pocket like a cigarette ember against his skin as he sat in the taxi, watching Naples blur past through rain-streaked windows. The driver, oblivious to the passengers' terror, hummed along to a crackling radio playing highlights from Mexico City. Maradona's name echoed from the speakers like a curse. Via Caracciolo. 1 hour. 15 years had passed since that night in Mexico, but the words still made his hands shake. 15 years of looking over his shoulder, of jumping every time the phone rang, of teaching Sofia to never trust strangers. 15 years of believing he'd escaped. The taxi pulled up outside the modest apartment building where he'd raised his daughter alone after Maria's death. The same building where he'd hidden from Grimaldi's men, from FIFA investigators, from his own conscience. Now someone with an Argentine accent knew his address, knew about Sofia, knew everything. Vinny climbed the worn marble stairs to the 4th floor, each step echoing in the empty stairwell. His neighbor's television murmured through thin walls. Signora Benedetti was probably watching her evening soap operas, safe in a world where the worst betrayals lasted only an hour and always ended with justice. He paused outside apartment 4B, key trembling in his hand. Through the door he could hear Sofia practicing her violin, Pachelbel's Canon, the piece she'd been working on for months. At 12, she played with the same fierce concentration she brought to everything. Mathematics, chess, the referee training manuals she'd started reading despite his protests. "She has your eye for the game," Maria had said during her final weeks in the hospital. "But she has something you lost somewhere along the way. She still believes in fairness." The memory hit him like a physical blow. Maria had died never knowing what kind of man she'd married, what he'd done in that stadium booth. Sofia had grown up believing her father was a hero who'd worked for FIFA, who'd helped keep football honest. Vinny unlocked the door and stepped inside, breathing in the familiar scents of Sofia's lavender shampoo and the garlic from their neighbor's cooking. Home. The only place where he wasn't Vincent Torino the conspirator, just Papa making dinner and helping with homework. "Papa?" Sofia appeared in the hallway, violin still tucked under her chin. She'd grown tall over the summer, all elbows and concentration, with Maria's dark eyes and stubborn chin. "You're early. I thought you were working the evening shift at the bar." The bar, his cover story, his new life. For 3 years now, he'd been managing a modest sports cafe near the university, serving espresso to students and listening to old men argue about Serie A. It was honest work, the first honest work he'd done since before Mexico. "Slow night," he lied, hanging his jacket on the door hook. "How was school?" "Boring, but I got my referee certification packet in the mail." She gestured toward the kitchen table where official documents lay scattered like evidence. "The youth program starts next month. I can officiate junior matches by Christmas if I pass the exam." Vinny's throat tightened. Sofia had been talking about becoming a referee for months, inspired by stories of her father's distinguished FIFA career. She'd read every rule book, memorized every regulation, practiced hand signals until her form was perfect. She wanted to follow in his footsteps, never knowing those footsteps led through blood money and broken bones. Sophia, we've talked about this. Refereeing is complicated. There are pressures you don't understand. Because I'm 12? Her eyes flashed with familiar defiance. Papa, this is what I want. You always said football taught you everything about justice, about making hard decisions under pressure. I want to learn that too. Justice. The word tasted like copper in his mouth. Through the kitchen window he could see the Bay of Naples stretching toward the horizon, the same view he'd stared at for countless sleepless nights. How many times had he rehearsed this conversation, preparing for the day Sophia would want to enter the world he'd corrupted? Your mother wanted you to be a doctor, he said quietly, moving to the window. In the distance, a ferry crossed the dark water, its lights reflecting like fallen stars, something clean, something that helps people. Referees help people too. They protect players, keep games fair. Sophia joined him at the window, slipping her small hand into his. You protected players, didn't you, Papa, when you worked for FIFA? The innocence in her voice almost broke him. Outside, Naples glittered in the gathering dusk, beautiful and treacherous as always. Somewhere in those winding streets, someone was waiting for him. Someone who knew the truth about Mexico, about Maradona, about the night that had shaped everything since. His phone buzzed. Another message, 30 minutes. Sophia squeezed his hand. Papa, you look scared. Scared didn't begin to cover it. Terrified that his sins would destroy the only pure thing in his life. Terrified that Sophia would learn her hero was a villain. Terrified that Maradona's revenge, 15 years in the making, would take everything he had left to lose. But looking down at his daughter's trusting face, Vinny made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Sophia, he whispered, we need to talk. Sophia, he whispered, we need to talk. Before he could find the words to shatter his daughter's world, the doorbell rang. Not the polite chime of a neighbor or delivery driver. 3 sharp, deliberate buzzes that cut through the apartment like gunshots. Sophia looked up at him, confusion flickering across her face. Were you expecting someone? Vinny's blood turned to ice. 30 minutes, the message had said. It had only been 20. His eyes darted to the referee certification papers scattered across the kitchen table, to Sophia's violin case propped against the wall, to all the ordinary details of the life he was about to lose. The bell rang again. This time, 5 long buzzes followed by 3 short ones. A pattern. Recognition hit him like a sledgehammer. That pattern. It was the same sequence Grimaldi's men had used in Mexico City to identify themselves to hotel security. But Grimaldi had been dead for over a decade, killed in a Camorra power struggle that had nothing to do with football or Argentina. Papa! Sophia's voice seemed to come from very far away. Should I answer it? No. The word came out sharper than he'd intended. He forced his voice into something calmer. Go to your room, please. Take your homework. But now, Sophia. Something in his tone made her obey without argument. As her bedroom door clicked shut, Vinny approached the front door on unsteady legs. Through the peephole, he could see a woman in her 30s standing in the hallway. Dark hair, expensive coat, holding a manila envelope that looked thick with documents. She wasn't looking at the door. She was looking directly at the peephole, as if she knew he was watching. When she smiled, Vinny's world tilted sideways. It was Maradona's smile. The same crooked grin that had haunted his nightmares for 15 years, the expression of a man who always knew more than he let on. But this woman was too young, too feminine. Family maybe, a sister, a daughter. The woman held up the envelope, and Vinny could see writing on the front in block letters. Vincent Torino, personal. His hand moved to the deadbolt without conscious thought. Some part of him, the part that had been waiting 15 years for this moment, knew that opening that door would end his old life forever. But the waiting had been its own kind of death, and maybe it was time to stop running. The lock clicked open. Buonasera, Signor Torino. The woman's Italian was perfect, but underneath it lurked the faint musicality of Buenos Aires. My name is Esperanza Villanueva. I believe you knew my father. Villanueva. The name meant nothing to him, but something about her eyes, dark, intelligent, calculating, made his stomach clench with recognition. "I'm sorry, I don't—" "My father was Carlos Villanueva. He worked for Argentine team security during the 1986 World Cup." She paused, watching his face carefully. "He was also an accountant for Diego Maradona's business interests." The hallway seemed to spin around Vinny Carlos Villanueva. He remembered the name now. It had appeared in FIFA's investigation files, listed as a person of interest who disappeared shortly after the tournament ended. They'd assumed he was dead, another loose end tied off by Camorra cleanup crews. "May I come in?" Esperanza asked. "What I have to show you requires privacy." Every instinct screamed at him to slam the door, to grab Sofia and run. But where could they go? If this woman had found him after 15 years, there was nowhere left to hide. He stepped aside. Esperanza entered the apartment like she belonged there, her eyes taking in every detail. The modest furniture, the photographs of Sofia on the mantelpiece, the referee certification papers still spread across the kitchen table. "Your daughter wants to follow in your footsteps," she observed, picking up one of the documents. "How wonderfully ironic. Leave Sofia out of this." Vinny's voice was barely controlled. "Whatever this is about, she's innocent." Innocent. Esperanza smiled that terrible, familiar smile again. "Do you know what my father told me before he died, Signor Torino? He said innocence was the most dangerous thing in the world because innocent people believe in justice." She opened the manila envelope and withdrew a thick stack of photographs. The top image made Vinny's legs go weak. It was him in the Mexico City Stadium booth, money clearly visible on the table between him and Grimaldi. 15 years ago, my father was assigned to monitor communications around the Argentine team," Esperanza continued, placing the photographs on the kitchen table next to Sofia's referee materials. "He discovered the Camorra plot 3 days before the semi-final. Did you ever wonder why it failed so spectacularly?" Vinny couldn't breathe. "Your father told Diego everything. The x-rays, the bribed referee, the plan to end his career. They had 3 days to prepare." She withdrew more documents from the envelope. Financial records, communication logs, medical reports. 3 days to turn your assassination attempt into the greatest performance in football history. From Sofia's bedroom came the soft sound of her practicing violin scales, innocent and pure in a world that was crumbling around them. "What do you want?" Vinny whispered. Esperanza's smile widened. "Justice, Signor Torino." Finally, after all these years. The photographs lay on the kitchen table like autopsy reports, each one a moment of damnation frozen in time. Vinny stared at his younger self, the confident FIFA coordinator in an expensive suit, shaking hands with men whose names still appeared in Interpol files. The money was visible in 3 separate shots, neat stacks of bills that had once represented his daughter's future. Now they represented her destruction. "These prove nothing," he said, but his voice sounded hollow even to himself. "Photos can be doctored." Esperanza pulled out a small digital recorder, the kind investigative journalists used. "Audio is harder to fake, especially when it's your voice discussing which defender would be most effective at breaking Maradona's ankle." The blood drained from Vinny's face. He'd forgotten about Grimaldi's obsession with documentation, his paranoid need to record every conversation as insurance against his own men. Those recordings were supposed to have been destroyed with everything else when the Camorra boss died. "Your father kept copies," Vinny said. "It wasn't a question. My father kept everything. Bank transfers, medical records, even hotel receipts from Mexico City. 23 years of evidence, hidden in a safety deposit box I only discovered after his funeral last month." Esperanza's fingers traced the edge of a photograph showing Vinny examining x-rays. "Did you know he spent 15 years waiting for Diego to give him permission to destroy you?" The violin music from Sofia's room faltered, then resumed. Pachelbel's canon, the same piece over and over, each repetition a countdown to the moment his daughter would learn who her father really was. "Maradona's dead," Vinny whispered, grasping for any lifeline. "Heart attack 2 years ago. Whatever revenge he planned ended with him?" Esperanza laughed, and the sound was crueler than her father's had been in those recordings. "You still don't understand, do you? Diego's death was just the starting gun. He spent decades preparing for this moment, building a network of people who owed him everything. Former teammates, business partners, journalists who built their careers on his story. She pulled out another document, a legal contract with Diego Maradona's signature at the bottom, dated just 3 months before his death. His final instructions were very specific. Wait until you'd built a new life. Wait until you had something precious to lose. Then show the world what Vincent Torino really is. Vinny's hands trembled as he reached for his phone. I need to call someone. There are people who can protect. Who? Esperanza's voice cut through his desperation like a blade. Grimaldi's organization crumbled years ago. The FIFA officials who helped cover this up are dead or in prison. You have no friends left, Signor Torino. Only ghosts. The apartment felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in like a coffin. Through the kitchen window, Naples sprawled in the darkness, millions of people living ordinary lives while his world collapsed one revelation at a time. I have money, he said, hating himself for the words. Not much, but... You think this is about money? Esperanza's eyes blazed with an anger that had been festering for decades. My father spent 15 years in exile because of you. He never saw his grandchildren grow up, never walked me down the aisle at my wedding. He died in a Buenos Aires hospice, alone, because Diego told him it wasn't safe to come home yet. She stood, gathering the photographs like a prosecutor preparing her closing argument. Tomorrow morning, these documents go to La Gazzetta dello Sport, ESPN, and every major football publication in Europe. By evening, your face will be on every sports news program in the world. The man who tried to destroy Maradona, finally exposed. The violin music stopped abruptly. In the silence that followed, Vinny could hear his own heartbeat, rapid and irregular like a dying man's. Sophia would see those photographs. She'd read the transcripts, hear the recordings of her father planning to cripple the greatest player who ever lived. My daughter, he said, his voice breaking. She's just a child. She doesn't deserve... Neither did Diego's family when you threatened them. Esperanza moved toward the door, then paused. But I'm not completely without mercy. You have 18 hours before the story breaks. Use them wisely. The front door opened, then closed with a sound like a coffin lid sealing shut. Vinny stood alone in his kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of his crimes and the ruins of his redemption. From her bedroom came the soft sound of Sophia's door opening. Papa? She called. Is everything okay? Who was that lady? Vinny looked at the photographs scattered across the table. His younger self, arrogant and corrupt, counting blood money while Maradona writhed in calculated agony on television screens around the world. In 18 hours, Sophia would see these images. In 18 hours, she would know the truth about her hero. But tonight, for a few precious hours more, he was still her father. Just someone from the old days, he said, his voice surprisingly steady. Come help me make dinner.